Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
And today we're here to tell you how we felt about the Hunger Games Catching Fire. Brandon, sequel to the Hunger Games, which you just saw recently, right?
Yes, I did for the first time.
Did you like the first one?
I did like the first one.
So you were kind of looking forward to this one?
I was definitely looking forward to this one. I knew going in that this was going to be more than the original. I liked the original, but it wasn't great to me. Like, it was good, but not great.
Okay, so this one, of course, kind of deals with the aftermath of what happened in the first movie, as you might expect, and sees Katniss and Peeta trying to make everybody in the public think that they are the perfect couple. And they're talking about getting married and all of this stuff, mostly kind of being pushed by President Snow in order to save face, so that she will be a symbol of the government, of the regime, and not the symbol of rebellion that some people are seeing her as. And so basically she has to be his puppet, or he's threatening bad things might happen to both of their families. And or to her family, I forget. I guess Peeta doesn't really...
And her actual loved one.
Yeah, I guess Peeta doesn't really have a family yet.
No, not... and he kind of explains that, too.
And so throughout the course of the film, as you might imagine, eventually she and Peeta both end up going back into the Hunger Games because they come up with this thing where, and I'll talk about this later because I had a question about it.
There's a clause.
There's this, we'll talk about it, this notion of every 25 years they're supposed to have a version of the Hunger Games where they go back to people that have fought before, and they go back to victors as their fighters in the games. So Brandon, how did you feel about this one?
I felt, basically, this movie made me realize that even in the face of madness and nail-biting annihilation, there is still hope. Hope brought to you by the Hunger Games.
Okay, so so you thought this one was quite a bit better than the last one?
This one was miles above the first one in my book. I'd say this movie had more of a story that they could tell because they'd set up a lot of things in the first one.
Yeah.
I didn't need a lot of extra explanation like I did in the first one, not knowing anything about the Hunger Games when I went into it. In fact, the reason I waited so long to see the Hunger Games in the first place is because I had zero interest in it.
Yeah. Until
I heard basically that, it's actually kind of a shocking story, and it was. This one for me, there were some amazing visual effects and some amazing acting going on here, but the storyline, I think, was the best part for me. I would say that there was we got more of the love that I think I was looking for in the first one that we couldn't get, and I explain that basically. We get to see kind of exactly what term her relationship is on with her guy back in District 12.
Right.
And then we get to see kind of how shallow she was kind of being for the games to win the games in the first movie with Peeta. We got to see kind of this edginess between them in their separation.
You think she was shallow? What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
When I say that, I mean that I believe that she was, of course, she was pandering, but I believe she thought she was pandering in a way that he would follow. Instead, he was kind of taken in more by it.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And he didn't... It's explained here that he now understands exactly what she was doing, and that he hadn't understood what she was doing in the first movie.
Right, sure.
He kind of fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, and she kind of thought he would have gone along for the ride.
Was there something you didn't like?
Something that I didn't like about this movie, boy, it's hard to say. Something that I really didn't like about this movie. God, this movie
it's pretty good.
It is pretty darn good.
Yeah. I mean, maybe on repeat viewing, something jumps out.
Yeah, I don't know. This movie's designed to shock you. And it does that most of the way through. If there's one thing that
Well, I don't think that's all it's for.
No,
you know what I mean, like I don't think it's a sensational film.
No, but it's designed to shock you in many ways. However, I feel like this is unfortunately, kind of a possibility in our future. In the first one, I kind of got the impression that there's no way this could actually happen.
Yeah.
But in this one, I actually got the feeling that if certain things trend in the way they have trended,
something
maybe
similar
we could
maybe happen.
We could almost come to this.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting and very scary for me.
Well, it's definitely really good science fiction. I mean, I said that about the first one.
Yes, definitely.
Let's see your verdict. We'll talk about it more in a minute.
I'm feeling it on this one. Definitely for the big screen. I enjoyed this very much. How did you feel?
This movie made me feel way more wrapped up in this world than I ever thought I could be, and my alternate one is it made me feel totally ensconced. And I didn't expect that with this franchise. I found the first one interesting, but I wasn't totally wrapped up in it. I guess it just wasn't totally my cup of tea. This one was. I could see myself turning into a fan of this thing suddenly.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about the first movie was that it didn't feel just straight up teen lit. Like, you could see how it was a teen book in the first place, but it doesn't get around the stuff that you need to really appreciate characters and stuff in a world like this. What I mean is there is danger and there is real conflict and there's more than just like easy sort of serviceable romance. There's more than that going on. There's a romantic component to this, but it does a fantastic job of being a huge part of the story. I think my favorite thing about this movie was the politics.
Yeah.
You have the Hunger Games, which, and of course, this is this world, but it plays really well in this film. They make a big deal out of this. You have the Hunger Games being this thing that kind of they think is going to keep the society going and quelch potential rebellion. Really interesting that it is, and I see where they're going with this. This is so classic science fiction. That's what I'm loving about it, is the idea that the thing that they came up with to quelch rebellion is the very thing that is causing rebellion, and I love that. So all these politics are incredibly interesting. You have the Hunger Games, but then you have the games that are being played around the Hunger Games. You have these, you have these political games being played outside of it, and President Snow and his colleague talk about that constantly. This idea of they say play counterplay. It's
a political chess match.
And it's neat that that's being played around what is essentially a game. And I really dig that. I really like this movie. There's not a lot that's not working with it. I could give you a list of 20 just fantastic things about this movie, and we'll talk about more of them here in a minute. I guess the only thing I can really point to is that there were a couple things that I was a little bit confused about that I would imagine I wouldn't have been reading the book, and this is an issue that you sometimes have with movies like this. We talked about this some with Ender's Game, that there were some bits in that movie where you could tell, okay, this got cut because they didn't think they had time for it, or because it wouldn't have translated as well to screen, but that the audience kind of needed.
Well, I saw you react in the theater.
There's a thing here where the thing I was confused about, and I love somebody to explain this to me, unless you understood it. I thought that the idea was that President Snow and his lackey come up with the idea of the 75th games being, let's put the victors in there because what's her name?
Katniss.
Thank you, Katniss. I keep wanting to call her Catnip because that guy keeps calling her that.
Yeah, love interest.
Katniss is making waves. And so I thought that the whole, because at first he's like, just kill her. And then he's convinced by that guy not to kill her, and so I thought that was when he came up with the idea, well, let's do the games like this. But then they keep saying that every 25 years they do that. Here's what I don't understand. If they do it every 25 years, why are people surprised by it? Wouldn't they already know that it was going to be like that?
Well, President Snow comes out to say that there's a clause in what they wrote that says that they can do this.
That's not what they say in it, and that's not what the synopsis that I read before this said, because I wanted to make sure about this. So I looked it up, and I read a synopsis, and it said every 25 years they do this. I don't understand.
Well,
how's it just a clause? And I don't remember him ever calling it that.
Well, no. President Snow is talking to the game designer of this year, and the game designer tells Snow about something they call the Ripple.
Right.
And so he sets this up as if Snow had never heard about it himself.
Yeah.
I think it's that in recent memory, no one can remember this happening. I think.
But the games have only existed for 75 years.
Yes, they've existed for 75 years.
So you're saying
this is only the third time that they've done it.
But so there are people that are more than 25 years old.
Yes, there are.
That doesn't make any sense. How does that work? No, what you're saying makes no sense.
But that's how the movie presents it. I don't think it makes that much...
I thought I was just missing something.
I don't think you were missing something. I think that there's something...
Well, then that's a hole, right?
There
I don't
is something missing.
That.
However...
Somebody explain this to me.
Here's the thing, though. That guy...
Because I've not read the books. I'm not into this. I don't know.
And
that confused me as just a casual viewer.
Well, the game designer set up the fact that he's all for Katniss.
Right. I called him the lackey, but yeah, he's the game designer, right?
One of the things that he said first, one of the first things out of his mouth, like the third sentence, was like, "You convinced me to come back."
Right.
He knows what's up, and I knew it. I knew it from that point, and I loved that.
Yeah,
because he's playing the president as well, and you can, and to a point, you almost forget the way he smooth talks president. You almost forget he's playing the president.
Yeah, well, he's playing a lot of things, and importantly, you don't really know what side he's on.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I'm definitely feeling it. I thought this was fantastic. I really enjoyed this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, we've seen some good films lately. Some good science fiction films lately too, man. This and Ender's Game. A lot of game movies. A lot of movies with the word game in them that are good science fiction films.
Indeed, I would say, based on what I was saying earlier, basically, I didn't find anything really dislikable about this film.
I didn't either.
For
I thought
me.
it was
So
really good.
Unfortunately, there's nothing I can come up with off the top of my head that says I did not dislike this. I felt that the pacing actually flowed rather smoothly for me in this movie,
and I didn't think it would be right out the gate. Right, like I start watching the movie, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna have all this time spent with the aftermath of the last thing, and it's gonna take forever to get into the thing. What I really got from this is that the first film is not a standalone movie. And I think I kind of left the first movie going, I don't really need any more from this, and I left the second movie going, thank God they made another one.
Yes.
This is, we were talking about this earlier, and you called it kind of a setup film, the first one, which I agree with you, and watched this one and went, this is doing gangbusters at being an ongoing narrative.
Definitely.
Like the relationships, especially, have some very clearly defined progression and evolution going on. It's not a sequel; it's a continuation of that story. It's really good.
Definitely,
it's really good at that.
We also see a relationship that I didn't expect to kind of flower in a way, and that came to fruition. And I wonder how they're going to tackle that in the end. How this movie ended was on a cliffhanger note.
and it's a great cliffhanger. It's one of the best ones I've seen in a long time. And I was also really impressed that, and I guess a lot of what I'm talking about is plot stuff that must have been in the book. So I'm praising a lot of things that probably the movie just lifted. But one of the things that I really dug was that they managed to come up with a plausible reason that she would have to do the games again. I didn't
know how they were going to do that.
I didn't expect that to work, and halfway through I found myself going, well, maybe it was not halfway through, but before we found out that she was going to be in the games again, I found myself going, are we going to do a Hunger Games movie without the Hunger Games in it? What is this going to be? And then it wasn't that, and I was surprised that it worked. I also really love how the title plays, and catching fire is a big deal, and I don't want to go into why and what it is, but the whole girl on fire thing from the first movie plays in a really beautiful way, on multiple levels, yeah. And I thought that was fantastic.
This movie showcases opulence in a way I don't think I've ever seen opulence. Like,
what do you mean?
In the Capitol, we get to see it. They give a little bit of time to this in the first movie, but not enough. We get to see that, they live life of luxury. But in this movie, we see the life of luxury. There's a particular scene where one of them says that, they're full. I think it's PETA. He says, I'm full. And then some socialite offers him a drink that it's for when you're full so that you can
get sick,
throw up,
get
sick, throw up, and then you can eat more. And that's a huge narrative through the whole thing, and that explains
everything you need to know about the society.
That explains the society and the narrative underlying everything. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Yeah,
the
games are there because we are pretending like we have a different problem than we do.
Exactly.
Because you know, with the different districts, and when you say we could get to this point, I do feel like we do have a pretty good structure of it's heightened and pretty extreme, right? Like it is out there. It is trying to do some commentary about you know present day issues in this in an almost 1984 kind of way.
It's kind of, but it's trying to extrapolate in a way that if certain trends continued, we might get
we would have problems similar,
but we'd have similar issues. I don't think we're going to be sending tributes to Hunger Games by any stretch of the imagination, but we're going to have some serious divergent problems between the classes.
But obviously, the issue that they have is that they're not willing to figure out a way to just be more fair to people. They're not figuring out a way to distribute resources.
They're not
in such a way that
reintegrating
makes any
these people.
sense. Yeah,
they're keeping them separated, and they're keeping them down, and they're squashing them, and
it's all just about history. They need a restructuring of the system.
It's about history, and these peacekeepers come in and they use brutal force in peacekeeping operations.
What I think is really interesting is that the whole thing with the Hunger Games is about preserving a broken system.
And indeed, it is.
You know, that's what it is. And the idea is that they try to perpetuate is that we fixed the system after the last revolution, and what really happened was the revolution didn't go far enough. It didn't fix the problem, and it just caused a bunch of new ones.
Well, they squashed the revolution. Absolutely, the districts are the revolution.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they squashed them.
They squashed it.
In order to preserve the peace,
I guess what I meant was stopping
few,
the revolution didn't fix the problems because maybe the revolution needed to happen. I think that's the point of the films, right?
Exactly.
They needed that.
Well,
do you think it's too? Sorry, do you think it's too preachy about present day? Do you think it's saying that we need a revolution, or is it saying that if you let it go too far, maybe you would?
I think it more speaks to the fact that
because there's definitely real commentary here, right? We can't just completely take it on its own.
But it's extrapolating. I think it's more extrapolating of present day, where people are trying to revolt against the system currently, but they're not doing it right. And I think that it's extrapolating what would happen if someone did it right, and then the government came down and said, "We're shutting you down. We're bombing you out. We're keeping you at bay. We're not going to allow this."
Yeah, we'll have to discuss that a little bit later, because I feel like to go any further in that discourse would be to give some things away about the film. But I'd like to talk to you about that because there's some interesting things there, but I don't think we can talk about it here. Okay, so I really loved the cast in the first place.
Absolutely.
And everybody continues to bring their A game. I love Lenny Kravitz. I think it's really cool he's even in these. I've always liked Lenny Kravitz's music, and now it turns out he's a good actor, and I really love that. And thank you for giving Donald Sutherland a lot more screen time as President Snow. I think he's fantastic. I've always liked Donald. Do you know who Donald Sutherland is?
He's seen him
Kiefer Sutherland's dad.
Okay.
And he had a huge career.
I've seen him in a couple other things. I can't place him at the moment.
Yeah.
But I definitely enjoyed him here. I also loved Elizabeth Banks' performance.
Yeah, and she got more to do, or not more to do, but I liked her more. You know what I mean?
I liked her more.
I think she was more humanized here, and I think everybody was, except for the people who were supposed to be more evil. But even they have some dimension.
Here's what I wasn't understanding. I was under the impression that, like Woody Harrelson's character, she was also a tribute at one time.
No.
See, I never
got that sense.
You didn't get that sense? Well, when I figured out that she wasn't was when she was drawing the names, and Katniss was the only one from the district.
She was the one drawing the names at the beginning of the first film too.
Well, I realized that.
But what I'm saying is they treat the victors different. Like the victors don't have that kind of a job. The victors train.
Right.
So why wasn't she training somebody?
Well, indeed, that's how I picked up on it finally during this one. But
no, there's other people that have similar roles to hers.
I've always loved Woody Harrelson and most of the stuff that he does. I think he's
I'm not a big Woody Harrelson fan, but I like him in these.
He does so well in this, and he looks just like the quintessential washed up big winner You know, just the getting drunk all the time, and he's perfect in that type of thing.
And there's something a little warped about that.
Absolutely.
That I really like, right? Because you've got this... because you think about prize fighters, right? Mm-hmm. And you think about how, like, they get past their prime, they can't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. And this is a guy who, the only thing he was ever known for was winning the Hunger Games, but that's not something you ever would have wanted to do.
No, absolutely. And
so
he makes allusions to that, and he finally comes out and says, you know, nobody wins at the Hunger Games. Because once you do, you just have to pander to the Capitol and everyone in the Capitol. They make a big point about talking about your sponsors.
You're basically a slave after that.
Basically, and all these other winners that we get to see, all the other tributes who won, who come back for this, we get to see that they are as much just mortified at the fact that they have to come back.
Well, that's one of the things I loved about this movie, was that it was a study of the different sorts of psychologies that might come out of this, and that's why I really appreciated that they found that they found like some really interesting, worthwhile themes to explore and characters to explore with something that could have otherwise very easily just been a gimmick to get her back in the games.
Absolutely.
Because it ends up, because it's like, okay, if the only way it would make sense would, let's make all the old tributes do it, and then or not all of them, but you know, enough to have 24. Mm-hmm. and then what we'll do is we'll explore not just what it would be like for Katniss to have to go right back in, which is wonderfully mined, but also what it would be like for people who are you know, elderly to have to go back in, and people who are middle-aged now to go back in, and people who have been fighting their whole lives to get over the horrible things they experienced in the Hunger Games.
Now here,
these characters were all of them that they focused on were very interesting. There's a few they don't really do anything with, because they just, you know, they don't have time. And also, we have characters that align themselves with Katniss, and just like with the first movie, those are the ones that we really focus on.
And you also get a feel for those characters too. You start to get involved more than you did in the first one. But I will say this: I thought this might have been a tiny plot hole. There is no guarantee in any of the Hunger Games that you are going to have a winner from a particular district.
What do you mean?
Well, you have 12 districts, and 2 from each district, but there's no guarantee that District 6 has ever had a winner. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, that's a really good point.
So the fact that they bring tributes back from every district.
I wondered about that. I had the same thought, but actually that's better than the thought I had. The thought I had was, what if you only had 2 and one of them died?
Right. You see, and
yeah,
so
that's really
when they're
interesting,
bringing back 2 winners from each district, they're choosing from the previous winners of the districts.
Statistically, you probably would, given that you've had 74. But how would this have worked if you did it at 50?
But even still, the amount of people who'd be left surviving or may have died just inadvertently, that type of thing.
Well, the odds, if you're living in any of the lower districts of surviving past the Hunger Games, isn't very good, because your chances of survival aren't that good anyway.
Right.
Well, anyway, clearly there's a lot of other things we could talk about with this. This is a dense film. There's a lot of stuff going on in it. As we said earlier, I think it's paced well. I think it looks great. Another thing I wanted to mention real quick too is in the third act, with all the actual Hunger Games stuff when they're in the arena, which, by the way, I enjoyed a lot more than with the first movie. And I wanted to mention that I thought that a lot of the hurdles that they had to jump over were really cool.
Yeah,
just like the traps and things they had to deal with. I thought that were very imaginative.
The only other thing that concerned me about this movie, I will say this now that I'm thinking about it, was basically when we see Katniss and Peeta again, they're in their district. And they've been there since the end of the last Hunger Games. But nobody else has been back in their districts. They've all been pandering to everybody in the Capitol. They're the Capitol's favorites. They've all been living in the Capitol.
Oh, really?
Why did Katniss and Peeta, why were they sent back to their district? That didn't make sense to me.
Was it just for the convenience of us seeing those characters again?
The tributes haven't been sent back. Like they say, they're all Capitol darlings, and the Capitol love them. They do press conferences and tours and things.
That's a great question.
And they get sponsors. And like the one tribute said, I was supposed to get to live my life the way I wanted to in the Capitol, and now here I am back again. that was kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, and if there's not any good explanation, which perhaps it was, again, in the book and not in the film, if there's not a good explanation, then it's probably just a contrivance of, we've got to see her family again, so we've got to go back there.
And maybe somebody can explain that.
Yeah, because I feel, the film is smarter than that.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that it's not that, but yeah, you raise a good point. Well, anyway, thanks everybody as always for watching us review a new movie, and we'll review something for you once again, probably next week. I'm Captain Logan,
and I'm Brandon.
See you later.